Hello, my name is Carl Surrey, and this is a video tutorial for the Facebook group called Fans of Serif Software. Now, I've been seeing and checking out recently Photoshop tutorials for a process which is sort of called out of bounds, out of borders, or 3D pop-up images, which is basically that you sort of make a false photograph and make it look like something is popping outside the borders of that photograph. Like this image I've done here of Alton Tower. It can look quite effective. I'm not 100% certain whether I've correctly gauged a good colour for a background yet, but I will try a different colour when I try this again. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to try it on this image here. So I want the top of the car to be popped out of the false photograph. There are two different ways to select certain parts of this, which I will get to later on. Because on the tower image, because it is easier, I use the smart selection brush. But on this one, because it's not as easy, I'm going to have to use the Polygon tool. Now, while we're talking about being easy or not, this process is not totally that easy. So what I have done is I've made a written tutorial as well to go along with this video tutorial, because there are about 22 steps in this process, and that's not going to be easy to remember even for myself, and I've done this 3 or 4 times now. So I've printed out the tutorial for myself so I can follow the steps on the written tutorial when I'm trying to look on screen and do the actual process itself. So I would suggest you do the same, is to download the written tutorial, but first watch the video tutorial to sort of help make sense of what it is I'm trying to say. It's easier to explain by seeing it than by reading the written words, but the written words will help you keep things in order, because there's certain tasks you need to do at certain times, and it's easy to get a bit mucked up about which part you should be doing when, as I have proved to myself a few times so far. So if I sort of get distracted a bit, it's because I'm trying to read what it is I've got to do next. Right, let's get started. And this image here, obviously the first step is to open whichever image you want, and have a good idea of which part of that image you want to pop out of the false photograph that we're going to make. Now, the first thing to do after you've opened your image is down here in what I call the layers display area, you have the background layer, which is the image. Now, a background layer by default is locked, and this means that even if you open layers above it, you can't move it, you can't change its opacity. You can obviously alter it by adding layers above it, or even just opening a tool from the image and adjust options. But we need this to be a layer and not locked. Now, to do this, you can right click and then come up to promote to layer, and then it will just change its name to layer 1. So now it's no longer called background, it's called layer 1, and as you can see, you've now got the opportunity to change the opacity. Not that I want to, but but you couldn't have done that before. So now I'm going to add a new blank layer by just clicking this icon down here. Just click OK, and now I want to drag this layer under that one. So just click and hold and drag it down until that red line appears, and then when you let go, you now have a blank layer below it. Now if I turn off this layer with the image by clicking that button there, as you can see, this is the blank layer below. Now this is going to be the background, and to fill in a colour here I'm going to use the gradient fill tool. Now you can use G on the keyboard to open this, or just click on the icon here, and the options for this tool are along the top here, and if you just click inside the representation of the gradient, it will open the gradient options. Now we are using the black to white preset here, which is the default one, but I'm going to change the colour of the stops. At the moment it's going from black to white. It probably does have be a good idea if you have some sort of idea of what colour works best with your image. I've done this a couple of times and tried different things. I'm not fully sure that I've got it quite right yet, so I'll try and make it a bit darker than I did before. So you just click it and the stop, and it will show you down here what colour it is actually at the moment. If you click in the colour, it will open the colour selection tool. I'm going to try blue this time, so I'm going to come down to the blue range, and I'll try a darker blue. And you can see up here you've got the representation of what the colour would look like. Okay, blue to white. Maybe a little bit darker. I'll come down a little bit. Yeah, I tried there. So I can click OK, and then click on the white stop, click on the colour representation, and again come down to the dark blue, but I want a lighter blue. I just want a subtle differences in the colours that I'm picking, because I just don't want a fully solid background. It's just want to be a nice gentle blend. That's it. So I'll leave it there, going from dark blue to a lighter blue. But like I said, you need to pick a colour that suits your image. I'll click OK on that, click OK on that, and then on the tool, it doesn't really matter so much if you go horizontally or vertically, but I'm going to go diagonally across the image. And as you see, I've got this sort of, it's not just a bland solid background, there is some sort of texture to it. So that is the background set. So I can now turn back on the image, hiding that background. So what I want to do now is come up to the rectangle selection tool, and I've made sure that the anti-alias doesn't have a tick in it. If you have a tick in it, if I go back to this red one here, which is where I forgot to put a tick in it, and if I zoom in, the edges look very jagged. That's because I forgot to take out the tick in the anti-alias. So let's zoom out again first. and go back to this image. So untick the anti-alias, and now you want to draw the outline of where you want the false photograph to be. Now, I would suggest when you do this is that you have an idea of the top horizontal line you want to be, because when you do the selection of the, in this case, the car later, you don't have to select anything really that's below the top line of what we are about to do now. Because again, if I go back to this image, I made my top line just underneath this window in the tower. So when I selected everything above and a little bit below the window, and I didn't have to bother selecting anything down here. So for my car image, I'm going to sort of use the top rim of the tyre as the highest point that I am going to select. So I'm going to select from down here in the right hand side, and then as I hope you can see that the top line of this selection area is just the top of that back tyre. And so I make a mental note, and it's like the top of the back tyre and nearly the top of the lamp on this side. Right, for the next part, what you really need to make sure is that it is the background layer that is highlighted. I know we are looking at the layer above, but I'm just using the image on this layer as the guideline of where to select. It is actually the bottom layer that I'm going to be working on. So what I want to do is, because if I was working on the top layer, it would deform the picture, and I don't want to deform the picture. So I'm going to come up to the deform tool, but I'm going to use selection deform tool, not the main deform tool. So select that, and I'm going to hold down the control key and move the corners. I'm going to move the bottom corners outwards, and then move the top corners in a bit, just to sort of give that 3D feel of the photograph laying flat and going off into the distance like that. So once we have made the selection, I can now highlight the image layer 1, and I can add a layer mask to that, and as you can see, we can now see the background because it is using the selection area that we have just made, but I haven't actually deformed that layer's image because I was deforming the layer underneath, which you won't notice. Right, on to the next part. We need to duplicate this layer by just right clicking it, come up to duplicate, click OK on, or rename it if you so desire. So you get a copy of that layer and the layer mask. But what I want to do is click on the layer mask, right click it, and then delete mask, and it will bring back the whole image again. So you can now press Ctrl and D to get rid of the selection area. And what we now need to do is to select the top half of this image. Now, there are really two good options for this, like I said at the beginning of the video, if I go back to this image here, what I used on this one was the Smart Selection brush. And let's have the brush size I can see. There we go, probably a bit more than that. There we go. Have a grow tolerance of about 50 and a border size of about 2. Now, because this has got nice, simple, straight edges, it is quite easy to select, for me to have selected this and pretty much get it all in a few strokes. And again, like I said, because I only went up as far as the bottom of that window, I know I don't have to bother coming too far down here to select any more. I would suggest, if you're using this tool, to zoom in and have a look around the image and just make sure there's no areas that have been missed. I think there's a little bit missed up there, so if I just lower the brush size down, and then I can click and just add some areas into the selection, or if it goes over an area, you can just click on the subtract from selection. So that is that tool quickly explained. But as this is a finished image, I don't need to be actually selecting it. And I'll go back to this image here, which is the one I'm going to be working on. And for this, I can't really use the selection brush tool because it's a bit more complicated, and I could probably do quite a good job and then take some areas off, but I'm going to just use the Polygon selection tool, which is the second option in the selection tools in this section. Now with this one, you need to zoom in and click your way slowly around an image. Anybody that's seen my previous videos will know that I actually hate this process, but sometimes it just has to be used. So you just slowly and laboriously click around your subject. I mean, this one's not too bad because being a Volkswagen Beetle, the edges are quite rounded anyway. And as you can see, it's a very sensitive tool. Sometimes if you click too quickly or have a very sensitive mouse, it will automatically make the selection for you, like it did here for me. Sometimes, like in this case, it's not a problem, because I want all of that area anyway, but sometimes it can go over areas that you don't want. You could click undo and start all over again. Or you could just used that selection and add to it, which is what I should have done. Let me just see, done it again every time. So if you want to add to it, you come up to the icons up here and then add to selection, and then I would start somewhere inside that selection and then come up to there, back round to where you start. When you come back to where the start is, the icon will change from have a little plus sign under it to a square. So now all that area is now selected and I can continue to add to it. I find this easy to do in sections rather than try and do it all in one hit. So I know that this side was under this lamp on the right. And roughly there. Come back over to top of there. If I just zoom out, as you can see, I've made a selection of this bottom part, but I don't need to come too much more low. I don't have to select any of this at the bottom, because that's going to be hidden anyway, because it's all below that imaginary line that I know is from the top of that wheel hub to roughly the top of the lamp on this side. So I will continue selecting the rest of this, and I will be back in a minute. Right, hello and welcome back. As you can see, I've finished off selecting the outside of this car, and if I zoom in and have a look at these windows, I have already taken a couple of them out, but if you come up to the icons along the top and click on the subtract from selection, what I want to do is take these windows out of the selection area, so it doesn't show the background from the original picture in the finished picture. It may not bother you so much on your particular picture. I mean, like the tower picture, I mean, although there was a window, you couldn't see, it was just black, so I didn't have to do anything with it. But I'm just going to go around this Volkswagen badge here. I'm not going to I'm not going to fiddle around taking all the inside of it out, but I'm nearly there. Oh, stupid tool! I hate this tool. So all I've got to do now is find where I started from, which is somewhere down here. Double click it, should complete it. There you go. So that is all the windows that was deselected from that area. Now in theory, if I was doing this properly, I should probably take out all these little squares on this side, because you can see some of the original background there, but I won't take that out. I'll just zoom out again. Now all I need to do now is just to modify this selection, but only slightly. I want to increase the feather up to 2 pixels, and then click OK, just to help smooth it out slightly. So once I have done that, all I need to do is make sure that this is the layer that I'm still highlighted, and then just click Add Layer Mask. And as you can see, we now have the start of the popping out of the image, because this layer is sort of protecting the bottom part, and this layer is doing the top part of the image, although you can't see your join. So now I can press Ctrl and D to remove that selection area, and as you can see, like through those windows, you can now see the blue background, but through that one you can see the original background. So depending on what you want to get out of your particular image, you could either leave those as they were, or take them out like what I have done here. So now we need to move on to the next part, which is to try and make this look more like a photograph. So I need to add yet another blank layer, this time at the top of the image, and then move the cursor. Don't highlight this layer, layer 1, but just move the cursor over its layer mask. Press the Control key and click on the layer mask, and it will bring back that layer mask's selection area. But you need to, it's like mine, it drops down to highlight that layer, come back and re-highlight the blank layer above, because we are not going to be working on the image as such, just on the selection. So if you come up to, or if you make sure that your foreground color is white, if it's already black and white, you can just click these arrows here to make the foreground color white. And then you come up to Edit menu over here and come down to Outline. Now, as you can see, it's going to be using the foreground color, which I set as white. I could have done it from in here, but it's easier just to set that before you start. And I want it to be inside my selection area. Click that, and I'm going to make the border somewhere around 40-45. I'll go with 45. I won't change any of the other settings, and then just click OK, and then it will draw this white border that makes it look like a photograph. Now you can press Ctrl and D now to remove the selection area. Now obviously we don't want this white line going across the image, so what you just need to do is to click and hold that layer, drag it down one place. Come on. There you go. So that is now behind. So this is the image being 3D popped out of a sort of fake photograph. Now, technically, you could stop now and finish this image. You could just come up to layers and merge all, and then save under a new name. But I want to take this a little bit further to give it more of a 3D effect. So I'm going to carry on and show you a little bit more that you can do with this image. So if I hold down the Control key and come down to the Layers display area and click on these two layers either side of the one that was already highlighted, so that I have all three of these layers highlighted but not the bottom layer, to not highlight the bottom layer, then come up to Layers, Merge, and then Merge Selected Layers. So now you have just two layers, the background and this image here, and you can now come to the Move tool and you can move the whole image because these are now all linked. So you could put it in a better position for what we want to do. In fact, I think that blue background works quite well. I was a bit worried about the blue car not working with the blue background, but a sufficiently difference between, in fact it does hide the joins, I think, because it's of a similar colour. So I'm quite happy with that, much better than the red I use for the tower. So once you have repositioned this to how you want it, come down to the Layers display area again, right click that top layer and duplicate it. Just click OK. Now highlight the layer below it, so it is that layer that we are going to be working on. Now over here in the tabs area, you may already have it selected on your PhotoPlus, but I don't. If you come up to Windows and Studio tabs, and then come down to Layers Effects tab, it will add the Layers Effect tab to the 3 that I already had. I've now got 4. So if I come over to this drop down menu and select Shadows, I've missed out a step. I'm so sorry. This is why I should have been looking at my notes. Let me go back a couple of steps. Let's go back. No. I'm so sorry about this. This is why I should have been looking at my notes. Just let me reposition that there. And first, what I should have done was to just slightly warp these edges. What I need is the mesh warp tool. I'll click on that, and then I will just drag these corners up slightly. I choose a different tool, so it gives that sort of bowed effect. Then I should have duplicated it, select the layer below, opened the Layers Effect tab, and then Shadows, and then you pick a shadow direction that suits your image. As my car is coming from left to right, I'm going to have the sort of shadow effect coming on this side. I could have had it coming from that side, and you can have various types of shadows, but I'm going to select this one here. Now there is a scale slider at the bottom here where you can, if you move it to the left, the shadow will move nearer to the image. So, but I want to move mine further away from the image, so I will come to the right, about there, and I will lower the opacity of this because that is still highlighted. I'm going to lower the opacity maybe down to 50% odd. So you've just got a faint shadow, so it looks like this is sort of hovering above the background. And then you can see you can see the shadow through the window as well, but obviously not through that one. So that is really the end of the tutorial. You can, again, at this point you could save, merge your layers and save the overall image. But one final thing I will mention is if you highlight the bottom background layer and you still have your layers effects open, you can add some effects to the background. So if I come down to skin, for example, and select one of these, you get a totally different background. So you can alter how the background looks. Some of them will be absolutely ghastly, I can guarantee it. But you're not stuck with the gradient one that I made. The wood one could work quite well because it could look like this is sort of floating above a desk or something like that. I mean, it's all totally up to your personal taste. But I must admit, when I've tried this before, I quite like the skin one and that lighter one there. But I will stick with the blue, so I will right click on the effects button, and you should be able to clear effects, that's it there, and it will just get rid of those. So I've gone back to my blue background. So like I said, that's the end of the tutorial. You just need to merge your layers and save under a new name. Thank you very much and goodbye.